Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is Amanda Gonzalez from the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of Miami. On behalf of all of the PAMN Steering Committee members, I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is part of a series of webinars offered to PAMN members throughout the year, and today's topic will focus on physician relations and the marketing team, best practices for integrated success. And of course, we want to extend a very special thank you to our generous webinar sponsor, Doximity, for making this possible. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to mention that there will be time for questions following the presentation, and you may submit your questions in the dialog box at any time. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Ashley Snowden is Director of Physician and Corporate Relations at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center in Buffalo, New York. Since joining Roswell Park's Physician Relations Program in 2016, Ashley has overseen market volume growth to the center, both regionally and across the state of New York and into Canada. Programmatic growth during her tenure has included team member growth, ownership of digital CME program, as well as creation of the Physician Relations Affinity Group for PAMN. She has a background in social work with a foundation in clinical case management for underserved populations in the Western New York region. Prior to joining Roswell Park, Ashley took an active role in the development of one of Buffalo's largest physician-led, clinically integrated primary care and specialty networks. Barbara Bussey is Associate Director of Physician Services and Business Development at Siteman Cancer Center in St. Louis, Missouri. In this new role, she directs a team of 3 physician outreach coordinators on regional business development strategies. Prior to her promotion, Barb was a physician relations outreach coordinator for over 10 years. She earned a master's degree in communication at Lindenwood University and is on the board of directors at a nonprofit senior care organization. With PAMN, she's co-lead of the Physician Relations Affinity Group. And Sheila Interante is the field marketing manager at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida. In this role, Sheila manages both the physician liaison team and conference planning. She has 5 years previous experience as a physician liaison, and prior to joining Moffitt, she was a cardiovascular representative for AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenters.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is Barb Bussey, and I speak for the 3 of us that we are happy to be here and to present this topic today. So let's get into the material. So as part of a physician relations objective, what is it that we're doing in the field? With a priority for new business development, that is by far the pinnacle of what we are trying to achieve in the field, as the coordinators and liaisons are out there meeting referring physicians and building those relationships. Obviously maintaining our loyal referral relationships. All of our centers have physicians that over the years have been continued to be loyal, but it's also continued to engage them with new and exciting things that are happening at our centers. CME education is another point that we achieve on a regular basis. So we are often putting our faculty, our physicians, into positions where they will be educating other referring physicians about new technology, new techniques, and new advances. Prevention and screening is a very hot topic. It is something that certainly on the marketing, the community side has an important feature, but certainly from the perspective of screening and other opportunities for prevention on the physician side, sometimes that's coinciding with educating them so they can then educate their patients. Certainly service recovery in respect to when things break down, when things don't work exactly as we think or know that they should or could. Certainly there are opportunities then that, you know, should a physician have an issue with whether it's sending a patient to us, with getting a communication breakdown of some kind, certainly they can count on us as physician outreach to help them through and navigate through those troubles, and to therefore keep the business, to continue to cultivate that relationship, to continue a profitable relationship with that particular physician. And then signature program development. And what I sort of mean by that is, what are those centers of excellence that you hold up and are poised for growth? And certainly those become a major focus for outreach activity. Certainly we want to draw business to them. Certainly we want to build relationship with our faculty, with the community provider, and those become a good start for us in the field on what we should focus on. Moving on to what makes a program successful. So if you don't currently have a program, or if you're on this call because you want to get new ideas about it, the people aspect of what makes a successful program is the most important part, the sales leaders. Having people who can have difficult conversations in the field with referring providers. Having them understand, what they need, and giving the provider the information that they need to make that referral to us. You also need executive leadership that embrace the role. I think that's a very crucial point. Understanding, what we're doing in the field as physician outreach coordinators, we're not supposed to be in the office. So sometimes it can be a little bit of, what's going on when you're not there. So being able to have executive leadership that embrace that role, that understand the role, and that we can communicate on a regular basis about the return on investment of the things that we bring forward. Certainly physicians who value the relationships and are willing to engage with our community physicians. The physician liaison can take the relationship so far, and they can achieve those referrals, but you build a stronger bond with your referring physician if you are able to take faculty into the field and introduce them to referring physicians. I have a physician here at Siteman who he makes sure to tell his junior faculty, you got to get out and eat the rubber chicken with the physicians, and that is absolutely the case. You have to get out and shake the hands, and you have to have faculty that is willing to engage, that whether it's through a didactic, whether it's through peer-to-peer, MD-to-MD kind of opportunities, that they're willing to do that, and that they're willing to ask for the business as well. And then just overall system-wide customer service. So knowing that, for us, we have, while there's many entry points to how referrals come to the Siteman Cancer Center physicians, certainly having a call center that we can track referrals, we can make sure and listen to those calls, making sure that they're receiving the proper service. The one that we have actually has oncology specific nurses that triage those patients and help get them scheduled. And we can guarantee without a shadow of a doubt how they're going to be handled and what efficiencies there are for those referring physicians who call that line. But certainly, when going back to service recovery on the previous slide, certainly things break down. And so having them contact us when they're not doing what we ask them to do by calling that one line certainly proves difficult. And so when things break down, we're still there no matter what.
Okay, thanks, Barb. This is Sheila with Moffitt, and just to piggyback on what Barb just went through, in addition to having people within your institution agree upon the program and having their buy-in, I think it's just as important to agree upon the activities that your physician relations team will commit to. So that certainly might vary from institute to institute, but I think we can all agree there's some very common activities that make up a successful physician relations program. So specifically, I think first and foremost, you've got to have that connection point from your community physicians to your institute or institutional physicians, and that goes both ways. So additionally, your physician relations team is tasked with providing better access and communication for referring providers and care teams. I can speak for Moffitt. When I first started several years ago in the liaison role, I would say more than 50% of my time in the field was hearing the stories about where the communication had broken down in the past before the physician relations team was in place. So while that's frustrating to hear, it certainly gives you a lot to work with as a liaison. So I think it's important to note how important that, that communication is, but also to note where it may have broken down in the past, because that's certainly something that your team can pick up and make vast improvements on almost immediately. So another important activity would be providing opportunity for education. We had mentioned earlier, that can be as simple as just taking your institute physicians out into the community to educate them on what services they might provide. It could also tie into the bottom bullet, which is providing continuing medical education opportunities for your community physicians. So equally important on both points. And then additionally, building and maintaining strong relationships with your community physicians. And there can be an ebb and flow with this, but that's where the liaison team is so important to, number one, build relationships that hadn't existed before, to maintain relationships that may be long-standing, but as physicians come and go, you may need to rebuild some of those relationships. If you had a strong referral base between a community physician and one of your oncologists, and your oncologist leaves, then it's your job as the liaison to take the new medical oncologist out there and try and build that relationship and get that referral base back. So that's something that's constantly changing, which is good for us in the form of job security. And if you look over to the pie chart on the right, just to kind of go through some of the activity breakdown. And again, I think it's probably going to vary by institute, but I think we probably all have some very common activities. And as I speak later on a specific example with Moffitt and our CRM dashboards, we had to refocus our activities as a team a couple of years into our program, just because the role changes all the time, so you have to continually monitor that. But just kind of go through some popular activities. You've got the doctor-to-doctor visits, office drop-in, phone calls, and our team takes that as far as to include phone call, email, and text kind of as a similar activity. We get equal credit for all of those. Our teams participate in grand rounds, outreach or CME events, general outreach and connectivity, literature drop-off. That could be as simple as just dropping off invitations. I know sometimes we go through a blitz and we've just got to invite everybody. So we might have 2 days of just 30 calls, but all you're doing is really dropping off literature. So that is reality at times. Emails, group meetings, and then new patient referrals. So just an example, and I'm sure you guys may have more to add.
Sorry,
that's okay. We'll transition to the sales funnel. And I think we're all familiar with this. I think every sales role I've ever had has had a version of this sales funnel. But specific to us, it's a marketing term for the journey that our potential healthcare providers go through on their way to referring to our institutes. So we can kind of go through the rings. And again, it may vary based on your particular site, but it's important to determine the patient-physician need and opportunity, like what are the immediate needs that your physician relations team can address. And as I mentioned earlier, in our case at Moffitt, it was kind of rebuilding that communication. Our institute grew so fast, that there may have been some great referral relationships in the past, but as we grew, we didn't manage those very well. And some of the community providers, at times may have felt like they were in a black hole and lost their connections. So that was a great opportunity for us to identify. You've also got to establish a sense of trust between your community referring providers and your institute. You've got to figure out what differentiates your institute from your competitors in the market. Focus on the clinical trials that you offer. And again, continually reinforce your reputation, continually monitor that reputation, and make sure that all of your efforts kind of go back into building that ongoing reputation with your institute and the community. Access and quality, very important. Access, we're out there asking for referrals every single day, but if access is a huge obstacle, it's going to make your job a little bit more difficult. So continually listening to your referring providers about what access issues they may be having, what may have changed, and constantly looking for opportunities to improve that within your system. And then at the end of the day, the quality, you tout the quality of your physicians, the quality of your clinical trials, the quality of your patient care teams, and then the quality of your own physician relations team. It all goes into building that referral base. So each of those elements within the sales funnel contribute to the overall referral process. I think it's important to note that based on research, it's been said that physicians have to have an average of 7 targeted discussions on the same topic. So as a team, you need to figure out what are those messages that you're going to take out into the field, and know that you can't go out there and say it once or twice and expect everyone to buy in. You know, based on this stat, if you've got 150 physicians and you've got a 200-mile geography, it's not going to be a month process for you to get those 7 targeted messages. It may take 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. It's going to vary based on your target list, your geography, and the size of your team. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a team of 5 physician relations, you may be able to divide and conquer faster than maybe an institute that's got a large surrounding rural community. It may take several years to kind of grow that business. So I think it's important to know, you know, stay on message with consistency, but then also know your community and have realistic goals for your team. And that being said, another result of the sales funnel research shows that the delivery of various messages to the same audience is just going to create confusion. So again, another reason for your team to be on board and be strategic and have set messages. I think it builds on your strategy, and it's going to allow for a much more productive physician liaison activity if you look at the consistent messages over the course of time.
All right, thanks, Sheila. This is Ashley with Roswell Park. We're kind of just bouncing around here, so bear with us a little bit. If we're going on the same thread of what makes a successful program, we have to include measurement. I think we all measure our ROI and our roles. I think that's a pretty universal concept, right? Like, how do we show our organization what the impact of our work is? So with the right systems in place, it can be pretty easy for the physician relations team to show this. We just have to have the right tools. So tracking activity is really crucial for us. I tell my team this. I feel very strongly about tracking every single thing we do, and I know that my colleagues here agree, and it can be mundane and it can be arduous, but you know, if we didn't track it, it didn't happen. And our engagements can be so spread. They can be so various between a phone call, between a quick interaction, but we want to capture that so that when we're able to show referral growth, we're able to really talk about the relationship that was built through these activities. So tracking is a huge part of how we measure. So having the right system in place to do that in order to pull that out is very important to us. If we work closely with our internal organizations, whether that be our business development teams, our finance teams, we need that internal information about what patient flow is looking like and about what referrals are looking like from the community, from the referring physicians, so that we can really tag those two together so that we can show, you know, ourselves, our team, and our leadership and our physicians really that the work we're doing and the engagement that we're having in the community is really appropriately correlated with shifts in volume. And of course, we want those shifts in volume to go up, but sometimes they go down. And it's important to understand that too, and why that might be happening, whether that's something that's happening within our own organization or whether that's something that's happening externally. It's important to have an understanding of what's happening there. Another important thing to think about too is what's happening in our market outside of our organization. I came from the payer side of healthcare before I came to Roswell Park, and I lived in this data-rich environment where we had access to any amount of data we wanted because, you know, all claims were submitted through us. So that was a big transition for me in my thinking when I started here, because I thought, well, what do you mean we don't have this? What do you mean we don't have this data, or we don't know who's referring where? Well, we wouldn't have that because if we're not submitting claims, if we're not paying for this stuff, if it's happening between 2 different external physicians, we would never have that. So partnering with the right competitive intelligence data vendor is really important. It really helps us to understand what's happening outside of our 4 walls so that we can kind of approach our outreach a little bit differently, knowing what's happening in the community. we have a little bit of a snapshot here of some of the early growth of our program here at Roswell Park when we really shifted our model from kind of more of a door-to-door handing out brochures type of engagement to true physician engagement with our faculty. Our projects around this time frame, which I need to update this slide, started with both the thoracic team and our GYN teams. And we were lucky enough to have, to Barb and Sheila's point in earlier slides, really engaged faculty members that were willing to go out to offices with me to connect with these doctors, to give them their cell phones, to talk about what cases they could collaborate on with GYN specifically. A lot of, GYNs are doing surgeries, general surgeries, but they needed guidance on what cases they could refer, what cases our physicians could stand by on. So being able to provide that connectivity really helped our volume because they were able to garner more standby cases, more referrals that the referring physician may not have sent. So having that true physician engagement has really led to increases in our referral volumes. And in addition, with support of our CME programs, we've really seen an increase in our participation locally across Western New York. We support our education department in reaching out, engaging with these groups, emailing invitations, hand delivering invitations. It helps them. It helps them get their word out, and it helps us because then we, get more face time with the physicians. We have really valuable information. We're not just stopping by to say hi, which is valuable as well. But if we're bringing them education and we're bringing them information that they can use and is helpful to their practice, it's a great engagement for them. So as you can see, over the last few years, our CME attendance has increased pretty dramatically since we started supporting the group. I will note that we didn't have a HEMONCS review in Syracuse in 2017. It wasn't a total bust. We just didn't have one that year. So that's why you guys are seeing a 0. I promise we didn't blow it.
Great. So we talked a little bit about what physician relations is, what we're doing, how we're doing it, ways that we connect with referring physicians. And so I think we're going to get into now, because we understand that not everybody works as part of an integrated marketing team. And sometimes when that doesn't happen, as we're talking to other physician liaisons and other physician liaison managers across the country as part of our affinity group, we're learning that not everybody has that way. So sometimes you have to just put it together and act that way. And so what we're going to talk about a little bit is, sort of why you need us, why we need you, and we're going to talk about specific examples to how we have each had success when it comes to integrated marketing teams and some project work that we did. So why do you need us? Why are we important to the success of our cancer centers? On the next slide, you'll see sort of a map, and this map represents new business that we can tie back to our visits, our relationships that we've built as physician outreach coordinators in markets. So this covers Missouri, Illinois, as you can see, surrounding areas. Each one of those blocks of color or shading identifies an area, a county that we have either anywhere from 1 to as many as 35 new referring physicians from those markets. And so why is that significant? So as we show this, obviously, you would expect that around your main location that you have a lot of shading, that you're still engaging with them. But I think what I think is interesting about this is that, it's not just what's in your own backyard, it's also what happens regionally too. And so we are really focused around cultivating these referral relationships with physicians in all markets. And so certainly bringing new business, we're all after new business in various ways, whether it's, generating new business on digital, whether it's generating new business because a provider or a patient has referred themselves because of a press release, because they've seen a commercial, because, there's various ways. But in our world, meeting these referring physicians and growing new business in our surrounding area is, the pinnacle of what we're all about. And so that's sort of why you need us.
And another reason you may need us or want us is historically physician referral accounts for, as far as Roswell Park goes, 60 to 70% of new patient volume over the course of the last few years. We do see some fluctuation in that, but that's a big majority of a lot of the patients that are coming in the door here are coming from their referring physician. So it's important, to keep in mind that the physician audience is an audience as well. We focus a lot on patient, which we certainly need to do, but our physician audience they have a lot of control over what happens with the patients, and we want to keep them engaged and keep them happy. And that's, what we and our team strive to do. This is important to kind of keep an eye on as you see, some decreases. And some changing is our landscape really has changed a lot. Specifically in this slide, since 2014, we see like the formation of ACOs, and we see integrated care models. And when this happens, hospital systems and groups become really limited on who they can refer to. And each of our cancer centers, I think, that are part of PAMN are set up a little differently. Some are more academic, some are freestanding. So how we all fit into those ACO models can be a little tricky, and it can definitely affect, how the referrals look. So we certainly need to keep a close eye on how this looks and how we can work together with our marketing teams to make sure our messaging to patients and to physicians, is really consistent, and it helps understand what our goals are for patient care.
And from the Moffitt perspective, I think it's interesting that almost the exact same split, about 60-40 between physician-referred new patients versus self-referred. So very consistent. And another thing to note with the physician-referred patients, at Moffitt, we're an academic center, obviously, and just with the sheer volume of clinic responsibility as well as research responsibility, our physicians don't have the luxury of being in the community hospitals and forming those relationships that a lot of the community oncologists might have. So all the more need for the liaison team to kind of be that touch point between the Moffitt physicians and the community physicians. Not being a part of those local community hospitals really kind of hinders us to some extent. And as Ashley mentioned, with the business models changing in the community, it's getting harder and harder for the independent oncologists to choose where they want to refer. A lot of them their hands are tied and they need to stay within their hospital system. So again, just noting that the predominant new patient referrals are coming from your community physicians, just very important to keep that relationship, and physician relations is needed for that. Our doctors simply don't have time to get out into the community as much as they would like to. So it's up to us to identify those opportunities and leverage them.
So this leads us to why we need our marketing partners, our partners in marketing. Some of us live within the marketing team. Some of us in our physician relations role do not. So, it's really important to help understand, how we can work together and why we need the support of the marketing team in our endeavors, because we really, really do. I think no one here is really a stranger to the patient journey concept. Our example here begins with the patient seeing their primary care doctor, whether that be for, a routine physical, a diagnostic screening, whatever the case may be that brought them there. Moving forward, the patient primary care doctor then finds that it's time to bring in a specialist, and the patient trusts that their physician, they trust who their physician's sending them to. That's historically how this model has worked. I think in a digital age now, we see that the way patients advocate for themselves, the way they approach their care is a lot different than it used to be. This is a little bit more of a historic model, really, in that, you just do what your doctor tells you. And I think our patients in this time are a little bit more educated. They're informing themselves, and they're doing a lot more research on their own, which is why it's so important that we, have these really strong relationships with our marketing team so we understand how they're talking to patients.
And I think based on the previous slides, we would love if the story ended there and that patients just did what their doctor recommended, based on the fact that we get 60% of our referrals from the doctors. But the reality is that that's not what happens. The patient leaves the office, and then you have these various disruptors that the patient, you know, faces between the time they're diagnosed and they're told from their community physician that they need to be referred to a specialist. Any number of things can happen, which speaks to the importance of working with your marketing team. But for instance, they go home from that doctor's appointment and they immediately get online. They're going to investigate everything they can find out about that diagnosis. In the midst of that search, they're going to see top cancer centers, not even necessarily in their area. You know, we're down in Florida and we get bombarded with every NCI designated facility they're advertising down here. So the patient's going to experience that kind of noise. They're going to hear from their friends. Everyone's going to have a story. Everyone's going to recommend somebody, and everyone's going to have an opinion. The patient's going to watch TV, and they're going to see these touching, endearing commercials that companies have worked so hard on, and that's going to influence their decision. And they're getting further and further away from that recommendation that their doctor gave them, you know, an hour ago, 2 days ago. The patient's going to check Facebook, and they're going to, again, see what all of their friends have to say about these particular diagnoses, about institutes, about doctors. And then again, the patient reads in the daily paper about the latest research. Everyone has access. You know, we hear something on the news and we've got it in our fingertips. We can go find out for ourselves. So it's important to us to utilize our marketing teams and be able to control that message as much as we can and control what the patients in our community are exposed to, and, you know, make sure that our institutes are top of mind and top of their news feeds and searches. And so again, this leads to why is it so important to work with our internal partners? I will say that coming to Moffitt, one of the biggest benefits that I saw immediately compared to my experience in pharmaceutical industry was that here at Moffitt, I had immediate access to my corporate planning department, to my marketing team, to my physicians, to leadership. So that was very eye-opening for me, and I really valued it because in comparison at the pharmaceutical industry, you basically were not involved in the research, you were not involved in consumer studies, you were told by corporate, which may be, you know, for me it was Wilmington, Delaware, someone in the ivory tower tells me these are the 3 messages that are going to resonate best with your doctors, go out and deliver them. So you really weren't part of that strategic plan. Whereas coming to Moffitt and being integrated into this, what was a small marketing team and has grown in the past several years, so valuable from kind of a sales and marketing perspective, because we got to be part of that voice. We got to weigh in on the research. We got to weigh in on, you know, let's take this message out into the field and use it for 30 days and then come back and kind of report. You know, I just think it's more real time, it's more valuable, it's more responsive. So I've definitely seen an improvement coming from, you know, the previous pharma industry to oncology specific. But again, just keep in mind that working together can provide a synergistic opportunity within your own organization and allows you to make some of those defining decisions when it comes to marketing. Keep in mind the breakdown with your institute on self-referral versus physician referral. It's very important. With Moffitt having a 60-40 split, it's just as important that there's some consistency between both that consumer marketing message and the referring physician marketing message. When you look at traditional strategies versus digital strategies, I will say that our department has evolved, and in the last couple of years, the liaison team has been a lot more involved with the digital strategies. It's been a learning curve for us, but we're starting to take part in those meetings, starting to take part in the analysis, and being able to go out and speak to our referring physicians about some of the digital strategies that Moffitt is employing, and it just makes for a stronger impact when everybody's on board with both strategies. So I think it's important for the liaison team to know exactly what's going on with their marketing, and as that grows, to be a part of that conversation. And then encompassing vendors. We've been fortunate enough at Moffitt to be able to bring in some industry vendors that can help us. You know, we may be limited by the number of people and the bandwidth that we have internally, but then we can bring on a partner that can help us expand opportunities with, say, our CRM, with our digital marketing. And that's been really progressive in the last couple of years. I can say going from the liaison role to the management role, I've been a part of some of those vendor relationships. And it's just amazing to me finding the right vendor, how they really can be a good extension of your team. And we'll share some examples of that going forward. And then again, just keeping in mind that, you know, continuing to grow that reputation of your institute with increased referral growth, everyone's going to be happy. Leadership, marketing, even your community physicians.
And as part of this program, we wanted to talk about specific examples of team integration. So I'll talk about Doximity and show kind of a scorecard, start with a scorecard that we have here at Siteman. And then we'll have a conversation around Broadcast Med as well as Salesforce. So first you're going to see a scorecard, and this was kind of our start of one, so bear with me. So basically, you know, as we all continue to work together with our leaders, you know, it can be hard to always define, you know, all the workings of what makes us successful. And so having a scorecard or having a dashboard might be helpful as you talk about all of these things. So this is an early draft of one that we've created that talks about the website and social media. It talks about other consumer campaigns and community outreach. It talks about media. It talks about our Patient Care Coordination Center, which is that call center I was talking about earlier. And then, of course, physician outreach. So thinking about in terms of visits and programs and other kinds of otherwise digital strategies, just like Sheila has kind of talked about a little bit in her previous slide. You know, physician outreach is becoming much more digital, you know, between, you know, whether we have different apps, whether we engage with, you know, for example, Doximity, which I'll get into in a moment, and other kind of digital strategies. Certainly is something that 10 years ago in my position, we did not have at our ready. So this is just an idea if it's something that you might want to incorporate as part of a reporting forward. It's a report forward that goes to everyone at our highest levels. And in my current position, I'm creating one that is just specific to outreach. So that way, when I meet with our faculty leaders, I can tell them about all of the great work that our integrated marketing team is doing on behalf of the Siteman Cancer Center. Going into Doximity, so we completed a year of Doximity and are on to our second, as many of you guys might be as well. You know, and through this, we wanted to figure out how to work together best. And so we created sort of in our own team a work group that included digital strategy, our associate director of digital strategy, our associate director for communications and public relations. We had somebody who's identified as kind of our data analysis, and then also myself with physician relations. And so through that work group, we identified that one person would sort of be this project manager, and then we all contributed, you know, developing, you know, what kind of, you know, talking about what kind of stories we're going to use for Doc News, which physicians to target for Colleague Connect, and really sitting down to identify different target audiences, different target markets, so that we could be and use this avenue as a best in practice. And so over the course of our first year with this, we exceeded Doximity identified benchmarks on all of our stories and physician engagement. So we consider that a real win. As we look to next year, I think that, you know, further defining what that looks like as we go further, but I'm sure that many of you felt many of the same things as you're identifying which markets to target, which physicians to identify and use for different avenues. But certainly having everybody at the table in all of their experiences and, you know, each working with our physicians in different ways really helped make the best decisions possible for this particular avenue, as well as other ones that we have in the mix.
So for Roswell, we just started a new relationship with Broadcast Med, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, or maybe not, possibly, but it is a new, the new relationship with a digital physician education platform. Historically, we worked with a different vendor. It was a project I kind of owned. We had 8 specific digital CAB videos. They were accredited by an outside vendor, so it was just kind of me working with the physicians and developing this content. It was pretty I wouldn't use the word simple, but it was pretty straightforward. And on this new platform, we have a lot more capabilities to showcase our organization in a few different ways, that we're not limited to these 8 videos. And we have a lot of different, we have a lot less limitations on what we can put out, the number of videos we can put out. We can do surgical videos now, you know, we can push things out to different audiences. So working with Heidi Finley, who I believe is on the call, and she's our marketing director, and her entire team has been absolutely crucial for the launch and the success of this. We're just coming out of really kind of the infancy of our launch in the last few months. So we don't really have a ton of metrics to share yet, but I highlighted some of the goals that Heidi put together as we laid down the groundwork for this project, and just what our goals were for reaching out with this program, what we wanted to do. And this slide, I think, really kind of encompasses what, they're everyone's goals, but essentially my goal is increasing patient referrals, attracting new physicians, increasing the number of referrals that come from existing relationships. And, you know, our marketing team, obviously, we always want to make sure we're improving our reputation, we're looking at our rankings, we're more visible too on a national standpoint. So being able to work really cohesively with this project has helped, you know, both of our departments really achieve what we kind of want to do. I think another thing that's been really helpful throughout this process is with the launch of, you know, such a big endeavor and such a big site, it's really given us a chance to sit down and connect with each of our service lines. When we launched this, we sat down with Broadcast Med and with every service line that we have. It was a really long 3 days, but we had 30-minute meetings with either a few of the faculty or potentially just with the chairs to talk to each of our departments about what they're doing, what they want out in the community, what do referring physicians need to know, what do patients need to know, what therapies are new. And, you know, a lot of times we get that information and it's disseminated to us in different ways, but taking that like really intensive period of sitting in that room for 3 days and meeting with each doctor and each service line to understand like what's really new and what's really happening, I think was extremely helpful for both of our teams to kind of get an idea of you know, what to do next. And it's helped us organize in our launch of like what's really important, what's priority, what's, you know, more of an announcement versus more of like a really actionable therapy that we want to engage new patients in.
Okay, and as an example from Moffitt, I wanted to spend a little bit of time and talk about our PRM. Salesforce is what we've been using for the past 6 years as a liaison team to capture our activity. And in the beginning, it was great. As the liaisons gathered information in the territory, we'd come back and we'd update our fields in Salesforce. So we kind of helped build our database. But a couple of years into using Salesforce and the role of the liaison evolving at Moffitt, we determined that we needed to make some changes. And this slide just kind of captures what we had been using in the first several years with Salesforce as our dashboards. We created these up front, and I just threw in a couple of examples to show you specifically liaison activity. You could pull this up during the day to make sure you're capturing all of the calls that you have. We had an automatic report that would be sent out every evening so the liaisons could look at it and make sure that they had not forgotten to log any of their activity. Pardot, which is listed below, there's no examples there, but that's an extension of Salesforce that we use to do our email marketing with referring physicians. And then liaison issues, that used to be a separate category that we would log any issues that we came across in the field specific to physician feedback. And then the middle column is an example of a monthly dashboard that would show call activity for a particular liaison. And so you could see over the months, you know, a little bit of fluctuation in the call activity, and that could be due to taking vacation time, holiday time, being pulled off task and not being in the field as much, whatever reason, but it gave us a good idea of what that liaison activity looked like on a monthly basis. And then to the far right, you've got kind of a snapshot of all 5 liaisons. We had 4 liaisons and 1 coordinator. We're down to 4 liaisons now. We no longer have a coordinator. But it showed all of the activity that was done over a 12-month period. So again, it was a good way to just kind of visually judge what activity was being captured from field-based work. And I go through that quickly just to let you know that a couple of years into it, the role changed, and we realized as liaisons, we were not spending as much time in the field, and we could tell that by the fluctuation in these field activity reports. What was happening is we were spending less time in the field marketing and more time navigating new patient referrals. It's a very important part of the job, but it started to kind of take precedence over outreach and networking. So we identified it, we tried to make some corrections, and then realized, wow, we need to really focus on this and get the role back to what it was created as. So we partnered with Salesforce. They gave us a list of preferred providers, and we went through a process of identifying who we wanted to work with. And we're lucky enough to have corporate planning as part of our marketing team here at Moffitt. So between the consultant that Salesforce recommended and our corporate planning team, we sat down as a team and we kind of re-identified what activities are most important to our role. And that goes back to one of the first slides we talked about in this presentation with the different activities. We used to have a list of 16, I think it was. We narrowed it down to 3 that we could all agree upon. And those were basically field activity, account management, and then physician outreach. Knowing that field activity was our priority, account management is necessary. That's where we roped in just kind of troubleshooting, navigating referrals, that type of thing. But management decided that we really need to refocus on activity, and we set up a goal among our team of having 20 field calls per liaison per week, and that's unique field calls. So if you go visit Dr. Smith twice, that doesn't count. It's got to be 20 unique calls and 20 different targeted physicians. So that being said, we all bought into the importance of it and that we needed to kind of rework our day-to-day activity, but we also needed Salesforce to change and kind of reflect our activity. It's not something, as liaisons, we had the technical know-how to do. So we had to work with the strategic partner externally, as well as with our internal corporate planning team. So they helped us rework our dashboards, helped us come up with unique goals that we would buy into and that we felt like we could achieve. So it took about, almost a year of sitting down with work groups, talking with the consultants, kind of going back and forth. I mean, we didn't immediately come up with the 3 activities that we all agreed upon. So there were a couple back and forth sessions. But at the end of the day, we were able to change our dashboards, which is the next slide, and be able to come up with something that was very easy for us to report back to leadership, easy for us to see in the field. And what you see is a series of gauge charts. And these are specific to liaison. You could pull up your own individual territory and be able to look at how you are trending for the month and for the week. So we wanted it as simple as possible. Obviously, you want to be in the green as a liaison and as a team. So if you look at the monthly field activities in this particular example, and you don't know where you are in that month, I would venture to say it's probably in the 3rd or 4th week of that month based on the goal attainment, which was at 72%. But you can see if that, and I'm sorry, these are all 4 combined territories in the very first gauge. So as a team, we're trending at 72% of our goal for that month. If you break it down by week, not as pretty a picture for leadership to see, wow, they're only 40%, but that could have been pulled on a Tuesday or Wednesday. You don't know unless you have the actual page in front of you and you can run the numbers. But again, the goal was to have something very easy to look at in the field so that you could gauge yourself on a week. Like if you were pulled out of the field and had to attend meetings or travel a long distance, by Tuesday, you may realize, oh my gosh, I've really got to kick it in gear and make some local calls and do something that's going to help me attain my goal for the week or month. And then the last 2 on the far right look at a specific territory. So this individual could pull this up and see that she was at 90% of her goal for the month and 80% for the week. But again, this technology going from the first set of dashboards to this would not have been possible just strictly as a liaison team. We definitely needed help from corporate planning and from the team that Salesforce put us in touch with. So I thought it was a really good example of leadership being responsive to, hey, we need to make some changes. We realize you've got this great tool, but it's not really working for you right now. What can we do to partner? So it was definitely a good experience to go through, and the results have been great. Everyone's utilizing the dashboards, and they're so much easier to report on.
Great. So with the last few minutes, I know we're getting close on time. We'll switch gears quickly to just kind of notify a lot of people on the call may know a little bit already about the affinity group that we have created. Barb and I were tasked at some point last year, it was probably right around this time of year, with connecting with each of the, counterparts, the other physician relations teams, the reps, the liaisons throughout the different centers that were part of PAMN. So, we started our first pass at it was a little bit challenging because we are outward facing people, right? So we thought, oh, we'll find everybody on the websites. We'll know exactly who to reach out to. So we did a big wave of outreach and it really didn't yield a ton of success. So we reached out to the steering committee, which was what we should have done in the first place. And the steering committee was incredibly helpful in identifying which members of their organizations would be, the right fit for potentially joining this group. I think that our roles are kind of unique. I mean, they're not, they exist in a lot of different places, but within the organizations, I think each of us kind of struggle outwardly and sometimes externally to explain what our job is and what we do exactly. So being able to create a group with people who are doing, exactly what we're doing, and not only are we marketing our facilities and marketing treatment and care, we're doing it really specific to oncology services. So having this group to really connect on what we're doing day to day and what's working for us, sharing best practices has been a really great experience for us. We started probably in the fall, maybe with some of our, no, maybe it might have been in the spring with some of our first calls. We've established monthly calls wherein we get to talk about different topics, different things our centers are working on. We had our call last week and Sheila had presented on, their bio contact card, so the physicians in the community are able to connect with the liaison team and they understand who they are and where they are. One of the topics I think that were suggested for next call was how do we market saturated services? So for breast and for urology and for things that are really heavily done in the community in this time, how do we market that and how do we explain that why coming to our centers are better? And, working with each other and kind of sharing some of those pain points has been really helpful and it's really let us grow a lot. So the next slide, which is not advancing, highlights which, there we go. All the groups that so far have agreed. We need to update this because we do have representation from Fox Chase now that's joined the group, as well as, oh my gosh, I can't remember. There was one other one that joined and they're not on here, but we're growing. And if you don't see your organization on this list, please feel free to contact us to put them in touch with us. We would be happy to work, to grow the team as much as possible. Our goal would be to have everybody attend the conference this coming April or May, I'm sorry, so that we can all meet in person and we can all connect. I think the monthly calls have been great, but it's always nice and beneficial to spend a little bit of time together. So I'm going to end there. If Sheila and Barb want to add anything to that before I wrap up.
Yeah, so I would agree with everything that Ashley had said about this group. I think that if you have physician liaison, people that you would like to have them connect, certainly this slide here has our information. We are, Ashley and I have worked we've now had 4 group calls, each with different topics. Even us reporting on what happened at PAMN since we had presented and attended the annual conference. Certainly, we would hope that one day that we will have a track there, but at this point, we are looking at engaging with other physician liaison in the markets and sharing best practices and talking through different things that are happening. Not only does that happen on the group calls, but now that we've connected over a couple of months, we're reaching out directly about different things that we are having trouble with or questions about how people handle certain situations. So certainly, I know that it has even become more fruitful than even I could have expected, meeting Sheila and other people within the group. So certainly reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation with them.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ashley, Barbara, and Sheila. That was some really great information, and I've definitely noted some key takeaways here. Before we open it up to questions, I think I see one. I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everyone to check out our PAMN website. That's at www.ncipamn.org to learn more about the many benefits of your membership. You can also link to our Facebook and Twitter pages, so be sure to follow us if you haven't done so already. And also be on the lookout for future issues of our newsletter where we cover relevant topics and also promote future webinars like this one. And so now to our questions. Ashley, are you able to see that Q&A?
Yep, I have that. The first question I have is, how do you handle joint campaign results reporting? Sheila or Barb, do you have any, do you want to?
I hope this addresses it, and if not, please type in a response. Oh, Pam. What are the PAMN handles again? So this is Barb Butty. So what we handle, how we handle that is through our scorecard. And so that's how we report in on the different marketing divisions on, you know, the similar campaigns. So I'm not sure if that gets to the point of your question, but if not, please respond. We have another question here. Are you adjusting your Doximity strategy to reflect any lessons learned after the first year? And I would say, yeah, I think that we are a bit. Certainly we had success the first year, but I think that we can get even better. I think that we're looking at further targeting different demographics, different markets for areas that we have growth, and certainly looking at our strategy for Colleague Connect and what that means to our brand awareness among physicians that are on Doximity and access that. In addition, with Doximity, you know, we're currently meeting with all of our faculty chiefs and our chief administrators and talking about Doximity and the importance of our own faculty to be part of those conversations. So when we have something in Doc News, for them to share it, for them to be active in connecting with their colleagues on that vehicle. Certainly, you know, we had success, but of course we're learning from them and adjusting for this next year.
Okay, does that do it for our Q&A?
Oh, I think another one just came in. I have one question here that says, what are the PAMN handles again? I don't know I know how to answer that one. Amanda, do you want to take that?
Sure. The easiest way is to go to the website in the footer, and that's NCI-PAMN, which is PAMN.org. And you'll find our links to our Twitter and Facebook pages.
The last question that just came in is, what are some best practices for marketing plan development that integrates both marketing and physician outreach? I think, you know, really, and I can answer this and my colleagues can answer as well. I think really just collaborating and understanding on what is happening and what messaging you're trying to put out to patients as well as physicians. I meet with our marketing team. We have not only through Broadcast Med, we have weekly calls, but we do have monthly, or I believe bi-monthly calls where the marketing directors and my team sit and we talk about what we know our physicians want to get out there, what, you know, what messages that they want to share. We learn about, you know, a lot of other things that are happening that we might have not have otherwise learned about. So I think that communication really helps us streamline our process, I think, is the best way. There's really no sense in both of us reinventing the wheel if we can just work a little bit more cohesively. And I think that's been really successful for us at Roswell.
All right, well, that takes us to the end of our scheduled time. Thank you again to our presenters. Thank you one more time to our sponsor, Doximity. Again, be on the lookout for future webinars via our newsletter and social channels. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.